I'm Haley Gamble, a Marine Extension Agent with Louisiana Sea Grant and the LSU Ag Center, serving the parishes of Lafourche and Terrebonne in South Louisiana. I'm originally from a little town called West Jefferson in Ashe County, North Carolina, and I want to share some of the story of how the two communities that now hold a very big part of my heart came together for a really cool purpose and partnership. So on July 7th, I had gone home to visit with my family for the holiday weekend of July 4th. And there was a brand new coffee shop in the town of Lansing, North Carolina, still in Ashe County. This coffee shop had just opened. The owners were locals, a little bit older than me, but I still knew of them. Small towns, everyone knows everyone. So on July 7th, I had a fantastic coffee with my mom at the old Orchard Creek general store and coffee shop. In the town of Lansing, this is a staple. The downtown area has a lot of cool shops for tourists, but this is a rural place where people live and people are very reliant on agrarian society. And so when I was at this coffee shop that day on July 7th, I saw a familiar face. Her name was Ann Rose. My mom had worked with her many years prior in our county. She was also a nurse, as well as my mom being a nurse, but Ann now runs her own sustainable farm and focuses on organic farming and sustainable practices. It just so happened that when I was able to see Ann that day, she was really excited to tell me about a launch event that she was having that afternoon for a journey she was taking. That also featured a documentary called The River Warrior. This launch event was going to be a celebration of her embarking on a journey to kayak, starting from a little tributary, Big Horse Creek in Lansing, Ashe County in North Carolina, and finally make it into the Gulf of Mexico, following getting into the Mississippi River from the Ohio River. She was really excited because she follows me on Facebook, as many people do in small towns. That's how you keep up with people. She follows me on Facebook. She sees the work that I get to do as an extension agent, and she wanted to tell me how important this project was to her and how important it was that she wanted to raise awareness for where people's water came from and talk about how important it is to know what's in our water and that what we put into our environment ultimately ends up in our waterways. I was so excited she was doing this journey, and I told her where I lived. I could be to the bottom part of the Mississippi River to get to her at any time, and I vowed to follow along with her journey. Flash forward a bit to September 24th. I got a call, and from small towns, everyone knows the area code of a phone call in which you're from. Usually you don't answer a call that says spam or a number you don't know, but when you see an area code that you recognize, you're more likely to answer it. And so I ended up answering the phone, and it was a staff member from the production team of the documentary River Warrior that Ann Rose was filming. And they said, "Ann gave us your phone number, Ann was able to find you, and we need your help." So on September 24th, Ann was coming down through the Mississippi River, right around the town of Vacherie, and she needed to get to New Orleans, but she needed to get a boat. She needed to be on a boat that would help her navigate through the end of the mouth of the river down to Port Eads, and they also wanted the production crew to be on board this boat to be able to film her finishing the last stretch of the journey and the final days from New Orleans, all the way down to the port of the river to Port Eads. So they're in desperate need of a boat. They had some things lined up with the Cajun Navy, but it just so happened the Cajun Navy was having to be deployed for a storm that was barreling towards the coast of Florida. So I used my resources as a Marine Extension agent and relied on the Marine Extension program in Louisiana and other coastal connections. So through work that I've done in coastal education and environmental restoration, I was able to get in touch with Richie Blink. He lives in St. Bernard Parish. He lives on the other side of the river from me, and I was able to get with him and talk about the ability to get on a boat and have some film crew on this boat. So he works with another Marine Extension agent pretty closely in the St. Bernard Plaquemines Parishes area. And he was excited for this because he also has a business, Delta Discovery Tours, in which he does ecotourism along the Mississippi River, talking about the importance of our wetlands and the importance of our coast. He was all on board with being able to do this and help the production crew out and get this done, as well as try to keep Anne safe as she's finishing the last of this journey. So the next day, September 25th, I got to see Anne. She met us in New Orleans. She had camped out along the river, but we were able to pull her out, make sure she had everything that she needed, and I was actually able to talk with her about what she had seen so far in the river in terms of water quality and what she wanted to measure and just her experiences thus far. I also was able to give a little bit of history on hydrology in the Mississippi River, why marine debris is such an issue, and what local stakeholders need to be able to address these challenges. On September 27th, after 2,000 miles and 82 days, Anne actually finished her journey, and I was able to be there in the boat at Port Eads when she finished paddling to the very end of the river, mile marker 0, and she finished this journey for herself and for her community to bring awareness to the natural resources that affect all of us. It just so happened that on the 27th of September, we had this wonderful feat going on, but as soon as we got back to cell service from Port Eads, from the mouth of the river, we got terrible news. Anne hadn't been on her phone in many days. She had been doing blog videos, but she hadn't been on her phone to know anything that was going on or to talk to family members. But when we got service and we were still on the boat, we learned of what was happening in our hometown. And one of the first pictures we saw was of the town of Lansing, where Anne grew up and where Anne is actually running to be a council person. And the production crew decided that I should be the one to tell Anne what was going on and tell her she needed to call her mom, call her family, and make sure everything was okay. Now, Anne was still able to celebrate the journey that she finished, but then she was able to head home. And we actually saw each other again pretty soon. So the town of Lansing had a lot of awesome shops that were together and along the street front. And when I got home to see this picture, it was absolutely devastating on Friday to see the destruction that had happened from Hurricane Helene. So the hurricane that the Cajun Navy was preparing to go assist with as it barreled toward the coast of Florida actually sustained and came all the way to western North Carolina, producing catastrophic and devastating floods, winds, and often some tornadoes. So I woke up Saturday morning. I talked with my family. Everybody was okay. I woke up Saturday morning and I knew that I had to go. I knew that I wanted to be of assistance to my community and to my family. I'd already been planning a trip to go up that weekend, but we went ahead and extended the trip and went up. So we took 2 vehicles, and as soon as I woke up Saturday morning, people were calling me on the phone. People were texting me who had never really heard of Ashe County, North Carolina, but they had seen the news, they saw western North Carolina, and they knew that I was from that area, and they wanted to ensure that my family was safe and what did I need. I was so overwhelmed with many different emotions, but one of the other coastal connections that I have made is through an organization called Restore a Retreat. Ms. Polly Glover is the project coordinator of that organization, and I work very closely with them on education for coastal restoration in our communities. And immediately she had supplies ready to go that I could take with me to get up there. She had water, she had canned food, she piled it all in her truck, and she met me with all of those supplies in about 2 hours before I could get on the road and get everything ready to go. So as we're driving up to North Carolina from Louisiana, it did take us an extra 5 hours. Usually it's about a 13-hour trip. This ended up taking us about 17 to 20 hours. So we're seeing all of these pictures as we're driving, we're hearing different reports, and the news gets worse and worse. Houses were flooded, houses were completely destroyed, torn apart, houses completely floated down rivers, and the roads were impassable. Bridges didn't exist where bridges once were. And one thing you need to understand about rural western North Carolina is we have a lot of hollers. And hollers are a place where you live. Often your close family or relatives live in one holler, but these hollers have one way in and one way out. So if they crossed a creek, even a small branch, that bridge would have washed out and they wouldn't have been able to evacuate or get to any kind of shelter. There was also really no warning as the floodwaters rose from talking to different people in the area. And so a lot of people, if they were able to evacuate, they didn't really have anywhere else to go because of the widespread effect of these floodwaters. And some people just had to stay. They had livestock, and some people were older. They didn't have a place to go. They didn't have the ability to leave, and their only option was to stay while they watched the creek and river floodwaters rise. The amount of debris that started to show in the days following was also pretty astounding, because everything had been washed and pushed up against bridges, pushed up against houses. Everything had been crumpled. And the outlay of the river and the hydrology of all of those tributaries surrounding the new river in this county and surrounding counties in western North Carolina had completely changed. And that was going to be evident that that was going to be a change moving forward after this 500-year flood event. So these bridges were impassable. There was no bridge anymore. If there was a road, there was not a road anymore. So search and rescue was also very hard, because there's no way to cross rushing water and get to someone if you're just crossing 20 feet of rushing water. So on September 28th, I was able to get there. It did take me a long time to get there, and seeing the reports of things were not like seeing exactly what had happened. So seeing exactly the devastation that people were reporting and knowing these are roads, these are areas that you've driven in your whole life and seen your whole life, are really a humbling experience and something that you want to be with your community for. So another piece of geography, Ashe County is in the very tip-top corner of North Carolina. It's in the top northwest corner of North Carolina, surrounded by Watauga, Allegheny, and Avery counties. And those counties were also affected. I had a little bit of an in Ashe County. I have a family member, namely my stepmom, who actually works with emergency preparedness and emergency management in the county of Ashe. She is the director. So since this, I've been able to have personal communication with her and learn some of the statistics and facts that they know as they still are recovering. So in Ashe County, there's a population of approximately 27,000 individuals, and the county covers about 426 square miles. There's 800 miles of state maintained road, and in some form, each and every road within the county had damage. There are 325 miles of streams that were classified as having heavy impacts, where oil, propane tanks, houses, RVs, and vegetative debris were very evident and would have to be removed. In addition to the damage from the floodwaters and some of the tornadoes and winds, there were over 20 landslides that were reported just in Ashe County alone, and 3 of those destroyed homes or structures entirely. So over the next 4 days of being in Ashe County, I was able to deliver the supplies that my partners and friends were able to send with me as I drove up to North Carolina. But over the next 4 days, something even more incredible happened. Over 4,000 pounds of supplies, camping stoves, non-perishable foods, fuel cans, bar oil for chainsaws and toiletries were all gathered together. And this really came together in a culmination of different efforts. So Miss Polly Glover was still working. She has a son who's a pilot. She's very in tune with the aviation community, and she's also very in tune with relief efforts. She works closely with the Cajun Navy, but she also works closely with different communities in Louisiana to provide immediate relief and assistance. to folks in those communities. So she helped spearhead this along with members of my church in Houma, Louisiana, Bethany Church. So Bethany Church opened up their doors as people that I had no idea even were friends with me on Facebook or knew what Louisiana Sea Grant was or knew who I were sending me messages that they wanted to donate either funds or supplies to get to me. So in addition to those 4,000 pounds of supplies, over $3,500 in donations from residents solely in Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes came to me, and I was able to buy different supplies on the ground with them. Delta Discovery Tours, Mr. Richie Blink, who had just helped me a couple days before, also donated 100 cans of camping stove propane tanks. So I had all of these supplies. I had money to buy more supplies on the ground when I was able to get to a larger distribution area, but I had no way to get them there. And so Polly came in again with her connections to the aviation industry and was able to work with two pilots who are from Louisiana. One is living now in Texas, but they fly commercially as commercial pilots, but they also have recreational ties to the aviation industry and wanted to help. So on October 3rd, a plane came from Houston and landed at the Houma airport and met some of the most wonderful people, both of the pilots, some of my co-workers from Louisiana Sea Grant and the LSU Ag Center, namely Julie Falgu, Cherie Roger, and Reed Email. He was able to help. They took the supplies from the church and took them to the airport to load. Church staff from Bethany Houma was also there, and Ms. Polly Glover helping to make sure that we had a payload on October 3rd. So I got a text in the morning of October 3rd that the plane was headed to me, and the picture that I got was everyone standing in a circle holding hands, praying over the pilots, praying over the supplies, to make sure that they got to me safely, they got to the people who needed them the most, and they would be well received. And these people didn't know each other. My pastor did not know any of the folks that I work with. These pilots knew a couple of people within the circle, but they really didn't know any of them. But this was a moment that they all came together for a common good and a community they had never really heard of, but a situation that they were all too familiar with. So I loaded up some of my friends and family, took them to the Ashe County Airport to meet the plane. Now another pretty crazy thing happened when the airplane was coming into the airport. There were lots of different aircrafts that were being flown into this county airport, and there was only one hangar. It was a private business hangar that was being used for donations that were going to be then sent and transferred over to the Red Cross or to the National Guard when they came in. And so folks with those different organizations tried to stop and intercept this plane and take that aid for their own. But this aid was actually already spoken for, and I had different people who were going to be able to pick up this aid and transport it to very remote areas, namely the community of Lansing, and they were going to have to walk these supplies in, and they had already designated who these supplies were going to go to because they had prioritized who needed them most. So I worked with another connection that I never knew I might need again. My high school civics teacher and her husband, who works as a sheriff's deputy in the county, were able to help me ward off anyone who wanted to intercept this plane, and we loaded all of the supplies onto my high school civics teacher's father-in-law's trailer, and we were able to follow them and get these supplies distributed. Now, my family members were there, my sister and my cousin were there unloading the plane. They were so generous to help and so kind and willing to understand why this compassion and this partnership was so important. One of the most memorable things was being able to talk to the pilots who used their own personal resources, personal plane, fuel, and time to get here. The folks who had prayed around the plane made an awesome sign that said Louisiana sends their love. They all signed it to be able to share with the folks who were receiving this aid. And being from a southern area, my mom had to get the pilots a little bit of a sweet treat to take back for them, which of course they didn't want to take, but they just couldn't pass up any pound cake that day. So being able to talk with them and being able to understand how important it was for them to be able to do this also impacted me a lot. I was also able to talk with some people from the volunteer fire department as we were able to donate those supplies there. So specifically, supplies were loaded onto trailers and driven to Pond Mountain Fire Department and received by the firemen there. And other supplies were driven to the Lost Province Community Center in Lansing, and they were actually received by folks of the production crew of River Warrior and Rose. And so those supplies were then able to be distributed into the community of Lansing before the distribution of supplies such as toiletries, fuel, chainsaw, bar oil was able to get to them otherwise. So odd enough, I went to a workshop through the LSU Ag Center where they asked me what was the most important thing in my job and how am I impactful? How do I know if I've been impactful? And I was able to think and recollect on this experience and say that differences are made when partnerships are formed, but